I've had the idea to do this video for a minute now, but I hesitated because I wasn't sure exactly how to get it started or how to make it as succinct as I wanted it to be. But enough people have pissed me off recently that I'm in the zone right now, so I'm going for it. And in all fairness, this is probably more of a rant than it is the many documentary-esque videos I've been trying to make lately, but I'm still hoping to get some kind of constructive point across here. This video is all about the proclivity people have to gatekeep and generally be dismissive of other people's health problems. It's far from a new issue for me. I've had an invisible disability for 2 decades. I've had blood family, ex-girlfriends, and all manner of former friends make the deliberate choice to just not get it. Starting with my actual diagnosis. I have PTSD with an acute panic disorder. In short, that means that my nerves and general mood occasionally get frizzle-fried for absolutely no discernible reason at all. There are moments in life where I'm not functional. My hands can shake to the point where I can't shave, I can twitch to such a violent degree that you'd probably think I was having a seizure. Sometimes the thought of having something on my schedule outside the house can throw me into a bout of insomnia that can last for weeks. I am actually still recovering from Christmas. Life for me is frequently depressing, and I'm talking about clinical depression, the kind where a lot of people can't muster up the energy to get out of bed or take a shower, or in my case, ever actually feel what you'd call awake. Depersonalization, the feeling that things just are wrong, is a definite factor here. That sense that you're somehow detached from yourself or reality in general is a common state for people with anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar, and literally every other mental health disorder you can name off. But here's where the crux of this video lies. I have PTSD, and here is a list of symptoms from Mayo Clinic. As you study this list, there are 3 things that are very important to note here. 1 is that you don't need to have every symptom on this list to be diagnosed with PTSD. 2 is that just because you have the feeling like the world is hopeless, for example, doesn't necessarily mean that it is a profound aspect of your issue. And 3, even if it is a profound aspect of your issue, it doesn't mean that every single person who has the same issue to the same degree that you do cope with it in the same way. I can't overemphasize this enough. Health problems, and mental health in particular, is not a one-size-fits-all concept. A few years back, somebody made the comment that there were too many people on disability for anxiety. That person wasn't a mental health professional at all. He was a foot doctor turned politician who went by the name Rand Paul. What Dr. Dickhead didn't grasp about this concept, quite possibly because he's neither academically qualified nor has had any first-hand experience with what he's talking about, is that anxiety can mean a lot of different things. It can be as simple as the nervousness we all feel before going on a date or a job interview. It can be what I personally deal with, or it can be bad to the point that people lose all hope for the future and take their own lives. The fact that health problems exist in degrees of severity regardless of the name of the diagnosis is accepted as a matter of accountable fact by every accredited medical professional in the world. It isn't a new or ambiguous concept. So with that being said and true, it begs the question, why do people have to be dicks about it? And to even attempt to answer this question, I'm gonna have to segue yet again. In early November of last year, I set out to do a video on Amphetasia. Amphetasia is something that I personally deal with, which doesn't have much in the way of research. There is no universally accepted criteria for diagnosis. Whether it exists on a spectrum, how it happens, or whether or not it exists at all, are actually all still matters debated in the few academic circles that pay any attention to it whatsoever. It didn't even have a name until just a few short years ago. Naturally, I'd done plenty of research on the subject well before I ever did a YouTube video on it. I had a vested interest after all. But I made it a point to do even more background research once I decided to make a sort of made documentary on it. I decided to join the Amphetasia subreddit and an Amphetasia Facebook group and made it a point to tell everyone I was going to be doing a video on the subject, and I wanted to include any points they felt like were things which needed to be shared with the world. And a few people responded, and I made sure to include their points in my video. I also included the general sentiments of the people in some of the other posts from around the internet. I really put a lot of time into trying to represent the issue as best I could in the most well-rounded way imaginable. But there's an issue with calling it an issue because it isn't an issue. To some of the more irate commentators on the internet, it's actually a superpower. It isn't a disability at all. It's something which compels people to wear tidy whities outside of their tights and save the world as we know it. What advantages do I have that you don't, you might wonder? Well, I actually have absolutely no clue, because the furthest they've ever gone explaining that is... So now I have to apologize to the people that think it's wrong to even suggest that it's debilitating, despite the fact that they have zero empathy for the people who are all over both groups, saying that they feel profoundly defeated by it. Then there was the fact that I didn't include any details about hyperphagia or hypophagia in my video about this under-researched subject that has spent 2 seconds even having a name of its own. And damn near every single one of these people who had some issue with what I said or hadn't said is a self-proclaimed authority on the subject because they were supposedly part of a study, or they have it worse than anyone else. Or the talking walnut told them to go forth and be awesome on the internet, and that's why the overwhelming majority of them couldn't be bothered to be even slightly respectful of the fact that other people have different experiences from theirs. I woke up the morning I was typing the script for this video to an argument still raging from the night before. People in one of the Amphant groups stating emphatically that it isn't a disability on one side, others stating emphatically that it is on the other, and me still wiping the sleep from my eyes, wondering why it's so hard to accept that other people's mileage may vary. See, I personally have no dog in that race. I was disabled a very long time before I knew Amphetasia was a thing. I don't need to add to my list of issues in order to make a disability claim or to make myself feel unique in some way. I have PTSD with an acute panic disorder. I would gladly trade all that's unique or individual about that experience for the ability to work a minimum wage job any day of the week. Research on Amphetasia is still scarce, so I don't rightly know definitively if it comes in different flavors. But in my case, I don't personally believe that my specific experience with Amphetasia is one that I would classify as a disability. But let's be real here, and bloody look me in the eyes when I say this to you, it takes absolutely nothing from you to be respectful towards other people. So many people try to get me to reveal my definitive stance on whether or not I view it as a disability. It was a good 24 hours of trying to explain to them that I'm not the arbiter of what is and isn't debilitating for other people. I don't think that a single person on that page has the wisdom or credentials to be making that determination. One thing I noticed though is that while the people on the side of it is, or at least could be, a disability, were generally respectful towards others, while those on the it isn't a disability camp were by and large obnoxious little shits that bashed literally everyone who had even the slightest bit of empathy towards those whose opinions differed from their own. It's a hell of an observation to be making. You have such a small group of people who all have an issue that didn't even have a name till 2015. It isn't a commonly known issue, and as I said before, it's a barely researched one. It's a very isolated group in that respect. And instead of coming together and being supportive of one another, you have so many of them who are looking to be as straight up divisive as possible instead of expressing even the smallest modicum of understanding that other people might have different experiences from theirs. The most honest response I got from one of those people was someone who said that they find it insulting to have it referred to as a disability. I asked this person directly whether or not they had any respect whatsoever for the people who disagreed, and she replied definitively and quite dickishly with what I'm just going to sum up here as a no. She made the claim that if it were a disability, it would have been discovered a long time ago. And I tried to make the point that PTSD wasn't discovered until roughly a century ago, but she had an excuse for that too. And I couldn't help but get the impression that the root of all this contention isn't actually whether or not Amphetasia is a disability, but whether or not you want to think of yourself, or worse, for others to think of you as disabled. Disabled is a dirty word in America, in particular because we make a direct connection between your value as a person and your ability to produce. Disabled people have been demonized by our culture for generations now, and the acknowledgement that we, as in you and I, have anything in common brings you closer to my level, which is frankly viewed as a lower level than one you presently sit at right now if you are a person of able mind and body. No one wants to think of themselves as being in any way limited, or worse, being perceived by society as being as such. But we have to be real here. Society is designed to accommodate the masses. Stores are open during the day because most people are awake during the day. Students can fall behind in school because our approach to education is one in which is designed to work for the most number of students. When virtual learning became a thing during COVID, parents were all types of pissed off out of the fear that their kids would be left behind. How many of those parents ever once in their lives thought about the kids who would actually thrive in that environment, who had been failing before? We all have limitations, but if you find that you deviate from the norm, you have limitations which are going to stand out. Limitations which may very well isolate you, even if they have no real bearing on your life outside of just social connotations. I'd like to wrap this video up right there, being some mic drop, profound revelation moment. But the truth is that people who don't want to feel isolated is just one half of the equation. The truth is that some people hang their entire identities on anything they feel makes them unique. And those people may actually be the worst gatekeepers of all, because when you're analyzing something like Amphetasia, you're no longer questioning a divergence from the norm. In their minds, you're now questioning the entire essence of who they are.
And they're gonna get pissed.
Lastly, this video would not be complete if I didn't give a shout out to whataboutisms of the world. We've all probably heard these repeatedly in our lives. On my Amphetasia video, one of the comments reads, "Amphetasia is much less of a deficit than being colorblind, blah 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 blah." And I'm going to say roughly the same thing here that I replied with there. What about legally blind people? What about people who are quadriplegic? What about someone who's sitting in a burn unit right now watching their spouse die from third-degree burns? What about a person who drowned and burned to death at the same time while a gang of early 90s punk rock styled unicorns kicked them in the crotch? Whataboutisms are a rabbit hole, one that if you follow it through to the end, there's only one conclusion. No one ever has it bad enough to complain unless they have your specific problems to your exact degree and cope with it in the exact same way. And when you're in a conversation with such a person and you think that you've finally checked all of those boxes, don't be surprised for a second if you find those goalposts moving. I used to run a support group for people with anxiety issues. I stopped specifically because of the countless people who came there just to belittle others for being weaker than them. Comments like, "I have anxiety and I'm able to drive or go to parties," or whatever became a constant fixture of the forum, and it doesn't do those people who can't do any or all of those things any favors. The narcissistic perception that my reality with something determines objective reality is pervasive on social media. And I think I covered why there is that lack of empathy in my social media is manipulating you video, which I will link to below. But this subject really does hit me a certain way because a degree of empathy is something that everyone deserves. Whether you're dealing with something as serious as cancer or something as seemingly trivial as an issue which only is an issue because society makes it one, people process things differently. People have drastically different experiences with similar tests in life, and none of us are clairvoyant enough to see all of the threads that make up the tapestry of someone else's experience. The best we can do as humans is to try to be supportive even with those we may not agree with, and at an absolute minimum, the least we can do is not be destructive. As I said at the beginning of this video, I'm gonna try to make a constructive point here, and so here it goes. It costs nothing to not be a dick to people.